there those children grew up. Now, as you know, it's just 50 years.
Yeah.
Now the government did extended the quota to their grandchildren. So
Oh.
the quota is for 30%. The maximum that has got filled is 10%. Well, India is always very cautious in responding to situation in, especially in a friendly country like Bangladesh. I think this is the biggest set of protests that she's facing. Sheikh Hasina is facing since she was re-elected, early this year.
Hello, viewers, listeners, and readers of the Indian Express. I am Flora Swai, and we are going to talk about the raging quota protests happening in Bangladesh today. With me, I have the diplomatic editor of the Indian Express, Shubhojit Roy, and let's dive in. Shubhojit, first of the topic, Bangladesh has a bloody history when it comes to its birth. The country was born in sort of this bloodbath and political turmoil. And the protests that are ongoing today stem from there. So, how do you see and how can you explain that how the birth of the country has affected something that happened 50 years ago is still impacting students and people in 2024?
So, Flora, first off, the partition, experience that happened between India and Pakistan, um, and at that point of time, West Pakistan and East Pakistan were formed, dividing India, and at that point of time, the issue of religion became the basis of the partition. But soon, within few years, in East Pakistan, which is present-day Bangladesh, there was sort of a more cultural and a language movement
Right.
that started, where Bengali identity, Bengali culture, Bengali language uh, became much more important for people living in East Pakistan as compared to their, say, their Muslim identity, their Islamic identity, and the other issue that came up was also uh, Pakistan, which is West Pakistan's imposition of Urdu as the lingua franca
Right.
in East Pakistan. So that's how there was a sort of sort of an internal civil war kind of a situation between the Pakistani army based in East Pakistan, and at that point of time, General Yahya Khan was the Pakistani sort of dictator who was ruling the two Pakistans, East Pakistan and West Pakistan. So the Pakistan army versus the people of Bangladesh, people of East Pakistan, who thought their identity was supreme.
Correct.
Identity as a Bengali was supreme, and they felt this imposition of Urdu language on them as an imposition of some other identity that they were not comfortable with.
Correct.
So the language movement led to a sort of there are a lot of protests at that point of time, and especially in Dhaka, University became one of the places where those protests took place in favor of Bangladesh language. So and that escalated into this civil war, in which India also sort of got involved. India trained the what is called Mukti Bahini, or the Mukti Jodhas, who were part of the people of East Pakistan, Bengalis, who were fighting against the Pakistani army. Now, these Mukti Jodha, Mukti Bahini are basically the freedom fighters.
Correct.
So India sort of trained them, aided them, supported them, and when the war finally broke out between India and Pakistan, when India got in to the act in December 1971.
Correct.
The war lasted for about 10-12 days, and what happened was, that led to a situation where Bangladesh was born with Sheikh Mujibur Rahman as the leader, who's belovedly called by people of Bangladesh as Bangabandhu, and he's essentially the father of the nation of Bangladesh, just like Mahatma Gandhi is for India. So he so that became the core identity, battle of identity, where he shaped the country as a secular country.
Right.
So Islamic identity was secondary to the Bengali identity.
Right.
So there was always but it was predominantly a country with Muslims. So the tensions between people within East Pakistan, who felt that no, their Islamic identity was also important, vis-a-vis people who felt that their Bengali identity was more important. That contestation continued.
Acha.
And Sheikh Mujib's tried to lead it by example, by sort of making Bengali culture, Bengali language, Bengali identity supreme. But there were people in the army, in the Bangladesh army, sections within the Bangladesh army, who still had the allegiance to the Pakistan army. They also felt their Islamic identity was important.
Right.
So that's how after 71, after the wars in 72, the nation became independent. The country became independent. An independent Bangladesh was born. But within 4 years, Sheikh Mujib was assassinated.
Right.
In August 1975, 15th of August 1975, he was assassinated, and he was assassinated by a group of Bangladesh army guys, led by General Ziaur Rahman, who was a powerful sort of army general. And in fact, there's a movie on this particular episode on Sheikh Mujib's done by Sham Benegal, which was done recently, which came out recently, which was the India Bangladesh, which captures this thing very, very well. And so what happened was, this particular after Mujib was assassinated, this contestation continued, where the country still felt those jerks. So what happened was, Ziaur Rahman lasted as long as he lasted. After that, in 80s, General Ershad came, who became the Pakistani president. Then, the Sheikh Hasina, who is the daughter of Sheikh Mujib, and General Zia's wife, Khaleda Zia, these two women leaders became arch rivals, and that has dominated the political landscape of the country for the last 30-35 years.
Absolutely.
And so what happened was, after Sheikh Hasina became the prime minister, so before Sheikh Hasina became the prime minister, Khaleda Zia was prime minister for between 2001 to 2006, and during that time, the Islamic identity came to the fore much more than before, and to the extent that extremists were mainstreamed in the government. They became part of the government. So there's a party called Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh, which became part of the government led by Khaleda Zia's party, which is the BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party. And so the extremist elements, or the more radical elements in Bangladeshi society, represented by this group called the Jamaat. It's colloquially referred to as Jamaat. Uh, so Jamaat leaders became part of the cabinet. So this extremist, radical views, radical agenda got mainstreamed
Correct.
because they were part of the cabinet, they're part of the government as a coalition partner. As a junior coalition partner, but a very important and effective coalition partner, because they had some traction on the street. So what happened was, that point of time, India was really concerned because India saw a rise in anti-India activities operating from Bangladesh in terms of terror attacks at that point of time, and more smuggling, more sort of illegal immigration. So all of those really, there was a lot of tension between the two countries at that point of time. And so 2008, when Sheikh Hasina came back to power, she tried to re-establish the secular identity, Bengali secular identity, after 5 years of almost rupture, or 5 years of more Islamic and much more radical form of Islam identity in Bangladesh.
Right.
So since 2008, since Sheikh Hasina came into power till now, for the last, it's about 16 years now.
No, yeah.
So 16, 17 years, she has really worked hard to curb on these issues of religious extremism. Launched a crackdown against the Bangladeshi terror outfits, like there was Huji, there were other terror outfits which were operating against India. So what happens is, now this particular contestation but doesn't disappear.
Okay.
It's still there in the society. It's been curbed, it has been checked, but what happened was, over a period of time, Sheikh Hasina also went after, or her government, they went after the Jamaat leaders. There were trials, there were sort of arrests that took place, and even she also went after, her government went after the BNP, which is led by Khalida Zia, on a corruption case.
Okay.
And Khalida Zia is behind bars now. She was in jail, now she's under house arrest. So this contestation has been real in Bangladesh politics. Now what has happened is, when the freedom movement happened in Bangladesh, there was these freedom fighters who took part. They're called Mukti Joddhas, and they formed the core or the base of Sheikh Hasina's party. Earlier Sheikh Mujib's party, then Sheikh Hasina's party, the Awami League. Now the Awami League is comprised of Bangladeshi freedom fighters, Mukti Joddhas. So as a respect, or as to them, as a tribute to their contribution, the Bangladesh government started what is called, so there are reservations, quotas, there are given much more facilities by the Bangladesh government. One of the things was the children of these Bangladeshi freedom fighters, these Mukti Joddhas, who are mostly from the Awami League.
Achha.
And they're aligned to the Awami League. Either they are active leaders, active supporters, activists, sympathizers, or are aligned to Awami League. Their children became the beneficiaries of these quotas for a reservation in jobs. Now, those children grew up. Now, as you know, it's just 50 years.
Yeah.
Now, the government extended the quota to their grandchildren.
Oh.
So, which is the current generation,
Achha.
which is protesting against these quotas. So, essentially, the people who are protesting against the quotas do not belong to the families of these freedom fighters.
Okay.
They are not the grandkids of these
War
freedom
veterans,
fighters,
yeah.
who are war veterans,
Yeah.
freedom fighters, or whatever you may call them. But they are essentially, So the issue is that these protests are essentially a continuation of this sort of a contestation between pro-Awami League, Mukti Joddhas, freedom fighters versus the others. So these protests, but however, these protests have come also because Bangladesh is going through an economic boom, but there are more younger people than there are jobs.
Yeah.
So as a result, the government jobs, the government pie is really small. The last numbers I checked, the Bangladesh civil services exams for which these protests are happening are essentially, they take annually, I think only about 3,000 odd people.
That's a very small number.
And they annually, so the applications are about 4 lakh people. So you can see that,
There's a major lag, yeah.
3.97 lakh do not get into Bangladesh, do not make the cut.
Yeah.
And only about 3,000 people, 3,000 students or candidates, they make the cut.
Yeah.
So this is a situation where there is unemployment, and despite the economic growth, this unemployment situation Bangladesh is trying to struggle with.
Yeah.
And that manifestation we are seeing. So these protesters are essentially the people who are losing out because they cannot get in. Some because of the quota, some without the quota also, but they are not able to get in.
Yeah.
And so their point of view is take away these quotas, because the quotas, I think, amount to about 56%
Yeah.
quotas, and of which 30% is for the grandchildren of the freedom fighters.
Yeah.
So what they are saying is this 30% is basically going to the Awami League
Yeah.
aligned people, families, only them.
Yeah.
So so their allegation is that it is benefiting the government, the ruling party's families,
Interests, yeah.
So and is discriminatory towards the meritorious students.
Okay.
So therefore they are agitating, protesting to disband this quota, and therefore to sort of open the pie
Yeah.
for normal general students
general
who are not part of the families,
Right.
but they are also meritorious.
Absolutely.
But the context that we have to look at, we are looking at 30% of 3,000 seats,
Yeah.
jobs. So it is really a minuscule number in terms of, if you really put it in context.
Yeah.
But the grievance is actually because of the unemployment situation
Right.
in the country, which is leading to these protests.
Absolutely. But Shubhojit, all this began with the 2018 judgment, where the court first repealed it, and now in 2021 they filed the case again, and then the judgment came out again, I think on the 5th of June, where the court again said that, let's go back to quotas.
Yeah.
So why is this? Because like you extensively said, this is a country that has a very rough to and fro and a very rough political narrative, but at the same time the judiciary also they repealed something and now they are backtracking on it. Why is that happening?
So, again, this is a question where the judiciary is also sort of grappling with the situation where the government had disbanded this quota
Yeah.
because of protests earlier.
Yeah.
But now the judiciary reinstated that quota because there was a sense, even among the judiciary and possibly in the government, in the ruling party, that why should the people whose contribution we value, they should be left out of getting a benefit in jobs when there are other quotas
Right.
as well, because there are quotas, I think, on disability, there are quotas
For women. Yeah.
from underdeveloped districts.
Yeah.
So that was the whole sort of contestation. But again, so I was just looking at the numbers that in the last 4 uh, civil services exams that took place in Bangladesh for these 3,000 odd seats. Actually, they're not even 3,000 seats, they're less than that.
But yeah, a rough figure.
But rough figure, about 3,000 seats. Although the quota is for 30%, the maximum that has got filled is 10%. So, if you really put it in context, it's actually a very small number of students or candidates who have benefited from this particular, from this quota for the grandchildren of the freedom fighters. But it has become a political hot potato issue right now, because people are agitating on the street, and there is a sense from in the Bangladesh government, which I have spoken to, is that there are large protesters who might be aggrieved because of the unemployment, but it is also possibly being given support by the opposition.
Opposition.
So there is an allegation that the some of the organization is being done by leaders from Jamaat, which is outlawed, which is banned right now, also BNP. We don't know whether those allegations are correct or not, but that is what is also being claimed by the Awami League politicians, which is the ruling party, which is Sheikh Hasina's party. Now, again, the core issue is the issue of unemployment, large-scale unemployment, and the government sector as a limited sort of jobs. So, therefore, the government is not able to provide the jobs to everyone, and these young kids, young students, young pass outs of college, young graduates, they are facing the situation that unemployment is really killing them. So that's why they are on the streets. So the main issue is about how Sheikh Hasina government takes this issue and moves beyond the politics of it and addresses the economic situation where the joblessness is tackled.
Right.
Because in the last 15 years, ever since she's come to power, the economic growth of Bangladesh has been phenomenal. It has been so good that it is, in the next couple of years, so it was classified as a least developed country. It is going to graduate to a developing country at par with India. So, and many other developing countries. So, you can imagine that kind of distance it has traveled economically. What it has done is, it has also created some private investment, some private startup culture, some private company growth as well. But it is not enough. I have been to Bangladesh, and I have met young entrepreneurs who have started, digital payment apps, digital ride sharing, the local ride sharing apps, their version of local Netflix, of Bengali movies and soaps and dramas. There are, the media there is very vibrant, so they have also employed a lot of young people, but the big industries are still the garment industry,
Correct.
which is which usually employs women, some men also, women mostly, and in the rural and urban areas, which is great for women's empowerment. But younger people who have been educated, say in Dhaka University or in other universities, and the education sector is also has grown there. You know, there are a lot of good universities that have come up. In fact, there are about 8,500 Indian students who study in Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
So they go there because they find valuable education there, and value for money there. But Bangladesh, the kind of employment it needs, as I said, 4 lakh applicants for 3,000 jobs. So it tells you the mismatch between demand and supply.
Yeah.
So these protests are actually a manifestation of that demand-supply mismatch.
Absolutely. The arithmetic is really lopsided there. Shubhojit, according to the latest updates, the death toll is at 50. And, there is this complete shutdown. News channels have gone off the air. We were following a local newspaper, the Daily Star, that has not updated in the last 24 hours. And the same with the Dhaka Tribune as well. At the same time, what are your latest updates? Because like you mentioned, the MEA has recently released a statement saying that, there are around 15,000 Indians, including 8,500 students, who are safe though. But what are your latest updates?
Well, India is always very cautious in responding to situation especially in a friendly country like Bangladesh. Because whatever Indian government says is interpreted as either it's pro-government or anti-government, because Indian statements have a political interpretation in Bangladesh. So that's why when you saw the Indian statement today, where it said, the spokesperson said that it's an internal matter of Bangladesh. That's where it's coming from. That it doesn't want to express concern like Americans have done, or condemn the protesters like Europeans or Americans or the United Nations Secretary General, they have done. So it is just saying so far that the government is keeping a close watch on the safety and security of Indian citizens, and so because it doesn't want to wade into this controversial zone. Having said that, Sheikh Hasina, because of her approach towards India, towards secularism, she has been a partner, friend, and an ally of the Indian government.
Correct.
Irrespective of who's been in power in Delhi, that has not changed. Whether the UPA was in power when she came to power, and then Prime Minister Modi, the BJP came to power, but that relationship, the Bangladesh towards Sheikh Hasina, the consensus has been bipartisan from the Indian side.
Right.
So the Indian side has so far supported Sheikh Hasina government, but it has also been careful and also it has been careful in its approach, which keeps the Jamaat at bay.
Correct.
Because they have been seen by the Indian government, by the Indian establishment, as spoilers, as a group which is inimical to Indian interests. So it has always wanted them to keep them at bay. So the question is, Indian government would support Sheikh Hasina's government, but it would not like to invest in a situation where, if tomorrow Sheikh Hasina's government faces the heat, the Indian side should not feel the baggage of that unpopularity of Sheikh Hasina. But it has always said that it will help Sheikh Hasina's government to create jobs, to with investments, with more projects, which may generate some jobs. But it has to be Bangladesh government's job to create jobs.
Right.
Indian government can't create jobs for the Bangladesh government in Bangladesh. So it is purely up to Sheikh Hasina government's now strategy, her approach, her roadmap, how she tackles this issue of demand-supply mismatch, and in a country which is aspirational, which is very, is quite educated, the youth of that country do not take to the streets, and really they are not alienated that she becomes unpopular. So she has to take those steps to bring in investment beyond the ready-made garment sector, beyond the current set of jobs the government has to offer. So that, I think, will be the most important thing to be seen. And the second thing is that the security situation along the border, which sometimes gets impacted because if there is unrest in Bangladesh, it obviously spills over to India and to the neighboring states, whether in West Bengal or in the northeastern states. That is something the Indian government would be keeping a close watch on.
Right. We'll backtrack a little bit, Shubhojit, because when Sheikh Hasina returned from her China trip, there was this term that she used when she was asked about the court's judgment regarding the quota. She used a term called Razakars. Now, why is Razakar a derogatory term or a slur, sort of, in Bangladesh? What is the history behind that?
Yeah, so Razakars were basically, as I explained earlier, that those in East Pakistan who helped the Pakistan army and were against the Mukti Joddhas, which is the freedom fighters.
Right.
So they were basically the collaborators with the Pakistan army. So Razakars are essentially the collaborators. So there is no bigger abuse or slur in Bangladesh than calling someone a Razakar. Now, so collaborators / anti-national or traitor, whatever you may want to call them, that's what Razakar actually signifies. So to give you a little bit of context, that when she came back from China trip, she held a press conference, as every Bangladesh Prime Minister does after any foreign trip.
Right.
That is the
hygiene,
norm.
Basically, yeah.
That is the norm in Bangladesh system, that after every overseas trip, the Prime Minister comes back to Dhaka and then addresses a press conference.
Right.
Where she takes questions of all kinds. Not just regarding her trip, but everything related to it. So one of the journalists asked her about these protests that were on. Her response was that who do you think will get the jobs if not the freedom fighters, children and grandchildren? Do you think, I'm paraphrasing here, you think if not the freedom fighters' children, but the Razakars' children? This she said on, I think, 14th of July at around 5 p.m. Local time. And in Bangladesh, because I've been there many times, I've had many friends. So around 6 p.m. in Bangladesh, across universities, across campuses, that is like the adda time.
Okay.
Everyone goes out, goes for a cup of tea, has samosas, has sort of snacks, evening snacks, and they sort of gossip and have heated, animated political discussions on social issues, current issues, all of that. That's the nature, that's the time. So 5 p.m. her her
Statement
press
went
conference ended. And then the first protests started around 10:30 p.m. So essentially, and then it went on, and Bangladesh is also a nocturnal society.
Oh.
People really sort of, are up till late. They're, some of their most watched television programs are at midnight. So the protest started taking place at 10:30, 1 o'clock, where this thing was interpreted as the protesters. Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is calling the protesters Razakars. So this was the interpretation framing that was done, and that's how the protests now became that we went to ask for jobs, we are now being labeled Razakars.
Oh.
So that is how that became the slogan, and today the Razakar. So people are basically saying that the government is labeling us Razakars because we are out on the streets.
Okay.
So so her statement came as a framing, as a different, as a very. It was a sort of a political statement that she made, and which got interpreted as she calling these protesters as Razakars. So that's how now Razakar as a word, as a terminology, has become part of the discourse, that protesters are saying that we are being labeled Razakars, whereas we are like normal common citizens. So that's the whole, because the whole argument is about the reservations for the freedom fighters' children.
Yeah.
So therefore, the Razakar term has become an important term now in the political discourse.
Absolutely. But at the same time, I want to ask you that, the protests are ongoing. What are the demands of the protesters, the students now?
So essentially, they have a simple demand right now. Firstly, that to scrap these quotas, and so that the merit-based system, people who can get in through merit, they can get into these jobs and pass exams. So that's their core demand.
Right. And you have mentioned multiple times that, you have been to Bangladesh and you are well versed with their political and cultural history. According to your experience and according to your opinion, how do you see the situation panning out?
I think this is the biggest set of protests that she's facing. Sheikh Hasina is facing since she was re-elected, early this year. That is something would be concerning for her political managers, the leadership of Awami League, because you also have to remember that she's been 16, 17 years into power, and she's facing fair bit of anti-incumbency. So it is quite likely that these protests may coalesce into bigger protests about, say, cost of living going up, and all these have been issues because post-COVID, the post-pandemic recovery, economic recovery has not happened as well as it should have. So Bangladesh is suffering economically as well. So the sense one gets is that these protests could spiral, could escalate into large-scale, bigger protests of anti-incumbency. That is a possibility. It all depends on how she handles these protests, because these are young people, and whether she gives them hope about the sort of a more meritorious based system, about creating jobs, about basically taking care of the economy, and as such the employment aspect of the younger generation.
Right.
That will really determine her course. and she has been a leader who has a fair idea of the pulse of the people, and that's how she's been in power for 16, 17 years now. But she's facing anti-incumbency, so those headwinds, those challenges, she will have to tackle. So we'll have to see how these factors she's able to, these are the X factors that she has to tackle from here on.
Right. This is basically a litmus test, we can say, for Sheikh Hasina.
Yes, sort of.
In a country that has been witnessing a turbulent past in the last 50 years, you can stay tuned to the Indian Express and its live blog that we are running on the website indianexpress.com. You can read all of Shubhojit's articles on the Indian Express website and, of course, the Indian Express newspaper. I am Flora Swine, and with me, the diplomatic editor of the Indian Express, Shubhojit Roy, and you were watching the official YouTube channel of the Indian Express.